Hello and welcome to Awaaz, conducted by EPS, Economics, Politics and Social Science Interest Group of IIMK. Today we have with us Mr. Sanket Bhale. He is currently working with WWF India, and we are going to discuss about climate change and preservation and conservation issues, the legal and political aspects, and how we as individuals can also contribute besides companies doing so. So hello sir, welcome to campus and thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
So, so you are currently working with WWF India. So, one of the aspects that people talk about now is climate change. So, which is a global agenda, especially brought forward by the Paris Accord. But there is no consensus even among scientists as to whether climate change is real or not. So, even presidents like Trump, they say that it is fake news. So, policies are built around that. So, what is your consensus about that? Like, do you believe that climate change is real, or like the data is not sufficient enough to prove that it is real?
Yeah, I think the data is unequivocally supportive of the fact that climate change is happening. The way we experience weather vis-a-vis the climate data is collected, it's quite different. The climate is about the trend, and weather is about what you and me feel day to day. So there's a lot of confusion between or confusion created in the minds of lay people about the difference between weather and climate by showing the data of certain years where the ice caps have grown bigger than they were previous years and things like that. But the data from ocean temperature as well as ice cores clearly show an upward trend, and there is no denying the fact that the carbon in the atmosphere has been going up, and CO2 is known to be a greenhouse gas, and gas effect is fairly well understood scientific phenomena. It happens also in your house, right? So with water vapor trapping the heat, and similarly there are multiple greenhouse gases, carbon, CO2 being one of it. So as the ppm level of CO2 in atmosphere goes up, it's quite directly related to the temperatures going up, because that's how Earth retains its warmth. Otherwise, if we didn't have greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the energy coming from sun would just escape back into the space. So greenhouse gas effect is fairly well known, well understood scientific phenomena. And the fact that greenhouse gases are going up in the atmosphere would mean that greenhouse gas effect would increase. It's fairly well established science from about probably a century ago. The fact that the lot of data of ocean acidification, ocean temperature, ice cores data is supporting the fact that increase in carbon levels is actually leading to more temperature rise. And again, the global warming as a phenomena is not uniform across the globe. It's happening in certain patches much faster. The ocean temperatures are warming faster than terrestrial habitats. There is a confusion with also urban heat effects. So it's climate, and our understanding of it and the models that we develop are quite complex, which is what allows for all of these doubts to come in, and for there to be a perception that the science is disputed. But most of the data we have, and even the IPCC reports that keep coming out, say with considerable amount of confidence that global warming is actually happening and climate change is happening. For example, ocean has been very clearly acidifying, coral reefs are bleaching every year, extreme rainfall events or extreme weather events are going up. We are having places like Kerala and Assam where every year these days now there is a flood, and every year these days subsequently there is a drought. Climate change is actually real. I mean, I'm sure even the lay people have started experiencing these extreme weather events and things like that, and all of them, as per IPCC report and fairly well-established scientific communities, is because of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. So a lot of doubt comes because of complexity of the climate, but in my mind and from my understanding, science is very well established about this.
But since you bring about that complexity aspect, there is a group of scientists who still believe that we might head towards a global freezing than a global warming, as happened with the ice ages, because of the Milankovitch cycles and the way the Earth moves around the sun.
Yeah.
And there are certain companies who are funding them because of this disputed claim. The thing is, this will all happen in the future, so we can't prove it as of now.
Yeah.
So, what is your take on that?
So, I mean, from the science side, I think the geological changes that are talked about in these cycles and the Earth's movement and tilting of its axis and other impacts take fairly long time to show an effect. We have had in the past a lot of variation in climate on the Earth, but the rate at which the climate is changing is slightly unprecedented. And it is because of, data obviously doesn't always show causation. For that, you need to do the scientific experiments and establish it. But correlation between our industrial growth and greenhouse gas emissions and the temperature changes that are happening rapidly is very well established. So again, I don't know specifically the scientists and the lobby groups that are talking about this, and we probably might need to be a little skeptical about it because who funds them and what their whether they have conflict of interest in developing certain scientific arguments. I mean, again, I don't know all of the scientists and lobby groups that are talking about it. I haven't personally done any research on who's funding them and whether there is certain certain amount of conflict of interest that exists with them. But again, we'll have to see individual cases of what this science is. But as far as my understanding of the issue goes, the science is fairly well established.
So one of the famous scientists who is working on this is Richard Muller. He's from Berkeley Earth. So he is famous.
Berkeley Earth.
So he was a former professor of physics at UC Berkeley, and later he developed Berkeley Earth, a non-profit, to work on this aspect. So he is famous because he was initially a climate skeptic, and later he turned a believer because he worked on the changes, like whether he really collected data from all places around the Earth, and he found out the anthropogenic effects of this. But one of the things he also points out is that the models you talked about used by IPCC and all, those are complex and cannot account for all the variables.
Yeah.
So there is always a bit of uncertainty.
Yeah.
But the analogy he gives is that it is like a genetic mutation.
Yeah.
So we do not know whether it will be good or bad, but it's safe to not go for that mutation.
Yeah.
So is your stand similar to that?
Well, yeah, of course, there is, as scientific inquiry and scientific method goes, should always be room for improvement and room for changing not just your results but also your theories based on new evidence that comes in. As I said before, climate science is quite complex. We don't understand it fully. There is effects like water vapor and cloud cover, etc., which actually changes the models quite considerably. Ocean is a big sink for carbon right now, and as ocean acidification happens, we are expecting that ocean will also start releasing some of that dissolved carbon dioxide into atmosphere, which will lead to another loop of positive feedback loop. A lot of ice cores have in tundra as well as in Arctic, we have traps of methane which might open up and would release, and methane being far more impactful in terms of its GHG greenhouse gas effect than carbon dioxide. So we might see certain positive feedback loops, and there might be certain effects like because of air pollution and aerosol effect, we might see cooling in patches as well. But again, we are messing with the environment. It's not it's something unprecedented that the Earth's climate has seen in terms of interference from a specific species, and species have been interfering with climate a lot. For example, all the oxygen we have today is because of phytoplanktons and growth of certain cyanobacteria. The Earth's atmosphere is not supposed to have the oxygen we have right now, and which has led to all the mammalian and megafaunal evolution, the availability of oxygen. So species have modified it, but the speed at which humans are modifying it and So rest of the ecology is not able to cope up with the rate at which humans are changing the climate and humans are changing the environment in general. So while species have been interfering with climate and Earth's environment for a long time, and a lot of species have actually formed the environment we have right now. But it has taken a period of time where other organisms were able to evolve and adjust and adapt to the newfound conditions, which also led to a lot of diversity that we see today and happened over the millennia of years, rather than 50-year or 100-year time that we are giving the ecosystem to readjust to our level of consumption and emissions, which is unprecedented.
So coming to the Paris Accord, so there will always be this conflict between developing nations and developed nations about the amount of CO2 emissions they can do now.
Yeah.
So countries like US have already gone out of that because of this dispute.
Yeah.
So what is your take on like India's stand and developing countries like China's stand? Should they stick to the Paris Accord?
I think US's exit from Paris Accords is massive disservice to rest of the world. I feel that US being the biggest emitter in the world, they need to take leadership on this. So yeah, the way US politics is right now, it's really concerning. As one of the so-called superpowers of the world, they are the ones we should be taking the lead on. Europe seems to be doing a lot better and a lot more. Also, when it comes to Paris Accord, again, I'm not an expert on climate solutions as whole. I work more on the biodiversity and direct environmental impacts and business sustainability. So my area of expertise, I mean, before I make comments on climate a lot, my area of expertise is mainly around water, wildlife conservation, terrestrial habitat conservation and things like that. And then working with communities, governance and issues like that more than climate per se. But again, this might be my opinions or personal understanding of the issue. So having clarified that, I feel the Paris Accord, the way it was designed, is fairly it's fair, fairly in terms of the responsibility given to developed versus developing nations. For example, when it comes to developing nations, there is no cap. Only targets that are set, which are for the GHG per unit of GDP, which means you need to be still be growing. You are allowed to grow. Only thing, the intensity of your GHG emissions per unit of growth needs to come down, which is a fair requirement to put in. And given that renewable energy now has tariff rates equal to or lesser than normal thermal power that you get on off the grid, it's a huge opportunity as well. Apart from it being sort of a mandatory requirement to have certain level of renewable energy, it's also a big opportunity and it's big market which needs to be tapped into. So I don't feel that it's unfair the way the negotiations in Paris happened, but unfortunately, so far, almost I think there was a recent report and an assessment which was done. 75% of the nations are failing to be on a track to meet their 2022 commitments. So India also being one of not satisfactory countries on that assessment that was done. So that's a bigger concern to me than actually whether those agreements were fair or not. Irrespective of developing or developed countries, none of them are. 70% of them are not on track to achieving those goals. That's a bigger concern for me and bigger topic of discussion for me than actually whether it was a fair process and who contributed how much and who's doing what and the politics around it.
So coming to your area of expertise, can you tell us about what you work on? What is the conservation status in India? Are businesses doing enough for that? What are the role of the government?
Right.
And what we as individuals can do more to contribute?
Right. There are a lot of questions there, but I'll take it one by one. So in terms of India as a country and its role, We are third largest emitter in the world already. Though our per capita emission is fairly low, and we still have a lot of people need to come out of poverty and being given access to very basic amenities. It doesn't have to be at cost of environment. A lot of times, environment versus development is shown as conflicting interest. I don't think they necessarily are. We need to start changing our narrative around how we define development. Uh, when a beautiful six-lane highway doesn't add as much to well-being as clean air does. So probably we need to have a balance. We need to look at ways to provide those basic amenities and conveniences without damaging the environment. And I think the ecosystem services that they get are generally undervalued in the economy because we don't put a dollar tag on it. But they're invaluable. I mean, the environment is a lot of times called poor man's GDP because it's free of cost. The system services you're getting, the water, the air, the forest produce, the pollinators, all of the services that you're getting from nature are absolutely free and currently are not valued at all, which means they don't come in your GDP calculations, but probably hits you a lot. So we need to change the narrative of development versus environment in a way within this country. It's not development versus environment. Environment should be the part of development. So we need to define, come up with better indices than GDP and just growth, economic growth, to look at holistic well-being, something like Human Development Index or other indexes that have been tried but aren't really a priority yet. So yeah, so that's about India. And in terms of the challenges that India is facing, some of the biggest challenge India is facing is health of its soil. Our agriculture has been fairly, it's not growing. There is a lot of concern regarding the failure of crops. Currently, government has been bailing out farmers as well as the banking sector, which has been investing in agricultural activities by farm loan waivers and other subsidies. But our agriculture is not doing well. We need to take care of that, and soil health is one of the biggest factor. Extreme weather events is a big factor, um, uh, which affects all of this. And we also, of course, have issues of water scarcity. Uh, there are 20 Indian cities as per Niti Aayog report. It's not an international, someone from outside coming and telling us. Our own Niti Aayog has done analysis and is saying that almost 20 cities might run out of water by 2020 in India, including cities like Bangalore, Chennai, and Delhi is not there, but Mumbai is also fairly okay. But Bangalore might be the first city to run out of water in India. Shimla did last year. Shimla ran out of water. And yeah, and the water crisis is not just about less rainfall. It's about extreme weather events, how rainfall is happening, how rainfall patterns are changing, how we are able to conserve and protect the water bodies, including rivers and wetlands and lakes that we have. The pollution, a lot of water becomes unusable because of the pollution. Almost 80% of sewage from Indian cities goes to rivers or ocean completely untreated, which means it's not just that water available is going down, we are also polluting the water that is available, which is also leading to scarcity. I mean, any river in any of the Indian cities today, you can't take a bath on it. In it, you drinking to forget about it. You can't drink a lot of water that we have now. It's not potable. You need extensive treatment, and you need technologies like RO, which only few people can afford. It also has 40% of water is rejected in the RO technology. Heavy metals, you really can't do much about it when heavy metals go into, when industrial pollutants go into water. Groundwater, once at least river water, if it's contaminated, river flows, right? Groundwater, once it's contaminated, there's nothing you can do. And most of our industries, as well as agriculture and individuals, a lot of households depend upon groundwater today. The groundwater levels are going down. So we are looking at a crisis of epic proportions in a way, and still our political will isn't there, or that we don't talk about environment as much as we should be. There is awareness, of course, but it's it needs we need a lot more and a lot more awareness and a lot more action on the environmental front. A few irresponsible statements come recently. Our Ministry of Environment and Forest made a statement that there is no evidence that air pollution affects the lifespan. It's quite irresponsible to say things like that, right? Because in Delhi, there are statistics that almost 40 to 50% of toddlers have respiratory issues which are likely to continue into their adulthood. It's bizarre that we still think that air pollution in Delhi is something that we can just brush aside and just go on as if business as usual and as if it's not a crisis. So we need to recognize the crisis. The first step is not being in denial and recognizing the crisis that is there, and then the action would come. So we need to accelerate the process a lot. Businesses have started understanding. Even Indian businesses have started really taking steps towards this. And businesses, I feel we need to move away from a typical corporate social responsibility model of environmental conservation to actually making it a core business issue. Because when water runs out, it runs out for everything. It runs out for the businesses, it runs out for the farmers who produce and sustain all of our F&B industry, for example. We are seeing that a lot of our thermal power, there is an estimate that in 2016-17, almost 20% of power generation through thermal power was affected because water wasn't available for cooling these thermal power plants. So there are direct environmental risks that operations and the supply chains of a lot of businesses face today. And instead of doing some plantations or paying an NGO to do conservation like us, which to be frank, I like that we have been funded for doing our conservation work. But I think the most important and most priority thing that business can do today is to look at their environmental risk within their operation, within their supply chains, within the geographies that they are located in, and act on it. Change your business practices, bring in sustainability, make it a core business issue. A lot of businesses have business continuity issue with the environment. Kanpur industry was shut down. Tirupur industry was shut down for 2 years in 2008 by Madras High Court. Imagine the loss of business that is there. If that much loss of business was there for some other reasons like market, businesses wouldn't take an action on it. But people, we have been just damaging the environment and waiting for a big crisis or a flood or something like that to happen to take action. But businesses need to start understanding these risks within their portfolio. Within their operations and their supply chains, address them proactively rather than waiting for that crisis to happen. And it's business continuity issues. Regulations are changing. They are becoming more stringent. In Delhi, during those pollution months, a lot of industries around Delhi are shut down because of their air pollution impacts. So imagine for 3 months in the year, your operations is shut down. Of course, you're taking hit on your balance sheet. So you need to invest that money so that it doesn't affect your balance sheet and probably helps you grow in the long term as well. A lot of areas are being, a lot of cities are hazardous industries or semi-hazardous industries are being asked to not expand in certain cities, and certain zones are created. So it's affecting your expansion of your business as well. You're probably having to move to much further where raw material is not available, market is away from you, you're spending much more on logistics costs. So all of these issues, businesses need to start think deeply about, anticipate them, understanding them, and take action on it rather than doing plantations. Plantations are good, and there are also a lot of nuances to that. It doesn't have to be monoculture plantation. It should be a plantation which has variety, native vegetation, which supports the local ecology rather than something exotic like eucalyptus. But we need to move away from environment being seen as corporate social responsibility to actual core business functions. And that's what I also drive as part of my work and have been driving. And we have been trying to get businesses to see this as a business issue rather than something that you do on the side to be good citizen or to be good responsible company.
So coming to the last part of the question, what do we as individuals, how can we contribute to this? Can we use funding the only way, or can we do something in our lives also, daily lives to?
Individual action helps, but I won't say that is going to solve our issues, because a lot of our issues are systematic. If you're living in US, for example, and US economy is carbon intensive, there is nothing in your lifestyle that you can change that would actually change the trajectory of US's GHG emissions. Same with India. India probably has least per capita footprint of any big nation. Which means any individual action can only contribute to very tiny amount of ecological footprint reduction. We need to look at policies, we need to look at systems and the way we manage our resources. We need to look at our economic model. So a lot of times I think companies also do campaigns to tell you things like, oh, now we have replaced our plastic straw with paper straw, and you're doing great for the environment. Probably only thing it does is reduces your guilt of damaging the environment, which actually isn't. Personally, I do have very low footprint lifestyle. I do not have, never owned a motorized vehicle transport. I use cycle everywhere. I avoid plastic almost like a plague, single-use plastic almost like a plague. I reduce my flight travel. I take trains wherever possible. But again, that's, I feel, is to reduce my guilt, personal guilt, and it's a personal choice. And I have no illusions about the fact that what I'm doing isn't necessarily changing or reducing the environmental damage that we are causing. So we need to find individually, you want to be a responsible citizen and a responsible human being and reduce your own footprint. That's well and good, but you need to go beyond that to think about systems, about policy, what you do in work. I mean, almost half of your day is spent, half of your awake hours are spent at work. What you do there matters as much as the other 8 hours when you are doing consumption. So, you need to go beyond your individual choices to look at systems, look at businesses. Wherever you're working in corporate sector, I really like. I want to challenge people and also request people to start thinking about how your businesses and your corporates are impacting or getting impacted by environmental risk. So that change in thinking that needs to happen in the economy, in the businesses, in the policy circles, all of that needs to be driven by us individuals, right? These are the individuals. We are the individuals. IIM grads are the individuals who will be in leadership position in a lot of organizations. So we are the ones who can drive change at systemic level. Much more than a lot of other less privileged individuals in the country can. So we who have privilege and have access to these decision-making centers in big corporates and things like that need to do much more than the individual choices to be fine. So individual choices are good, and I can give an entire lecture on how you can reduce your footprint and be urban tech savvy hippie. I can do a lecture on it, but I don't think that's really the priority for us to change the system and to change the environmental degradation that we're seeing.
So thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah.
I think this will be a very good